Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today I'm joined by Mr. Editor-in-Chief Jak-Luke Sharp as we continue our Hot Bun Summer series with a review of The Living Daylights. Timothy Dalton is typically overlooked when it comes to discussing the Bond franchise, but today we're diving into his film because, to be honest, not to give away the spoilers too early, but we think this is one of the best Bond films. Both myself and Jack are big Timothy Dalton fans, it turns out, and today we break down why we think not only the film itself, but also why we think his performance is so special within the Bond franchise. We talk a lot comparing this to George Lazenby's effort as Bond, and discuss why we wish that this was a certain energy and vision that the franchise continued with after the two films Dalton got. This is the penultimate episode of our Hot Bond Summer series, and I hope everyone is enjoying our 007 adventure as much as we are. Thank you so much for listening and watching the show. Without further ado, let's get to our full review of The Living Daylights. Okay, Jack, thank you so much for joining today for our penultimate edition in our Hot Bond Summer. I will start today because I thought it was important we include Timothy Dalton in this list. I feel like even Lazenby, which we talked about obviously, gets like a little bit more recognition just for being like, oh, he has one film. Timothy Dalton, I think, typically gets pushed pretty far into the background, only having two films as Bond. Neither film necessarily super talked about that deeply. So I really wanted to include him. I really wanted to get into Timothy Dalton as Bond, give him maybe the time of day that other people typically do not. And we picked The Living Daylights, which I know is one of your favorite films. I will say, because I've obviously seen all these once before, I remembered nothing about this film. Did not recognize anything about this. It was also, to be fair, like when you're binging these, you know, you're getting to that late stage Bond where you're kind of waiting for Daniel Craig, you know, that's coming, Pierce Brosnan is coming. So it's just like kind of, you're just getting through them. Maybe I didn't necessarily give this the time of day, but I'm so thrilled to have this podcast today and to have an excuse to revisit the film, because this might be one of my favorite James Bonds. I love it. And I did not necessarily expect coming out of the camp that we had previously. And there's still definitely some campy elements here. I did not expect for James Bond to have a film like this at this stage in its legacy that basically just kind of looks and feels like a modern action film, but I mean that in like the best of ways. It is so tactile and serious and has this great like intensity to it that you just I have never associated necessarily with Bond pre Daniel Craig, at least. But it's here. It has an interesting story we'll get into, as far as the setting, really expanding it to be a world geopolitics story. I thought worked well. There's a lot here where like I'm kind of shocked this does not get talked about more, and I want to rewatch the other film from this guy as Bond, because I don't know if that film is similar to this, but this stood out as like pretty unique, pretty worthwhile, pretty exciting. So I'm genuinely jazzed to talk about this. I feel like in this franchise and this series so far, I was like, well, I like some of Thunderball, but it wasn't necessarily my favorite. On Her Majesty's Secret Service, I really enjoyed. Man with the Golden Gun, I had some fun with, but this feels like probably the best film we've talked about so far, and the one where I'm like, yeah, I really stand this film. But Jack, I know you also are, I believe, a fan of this. Hopefully I got that correct. Let me know your history with it and what your opening thoughts are for The Living Daylights.
Well, I love this film, and I really like License to Kill, and there's a certain terminology and a certain buzzword that gets with these two films, and it's the dark. They're very dark, they're very brooding. They're a lot less lighter than what came before it, and there's especially with Roger Moore on the end of A View to a Kill. But in the same token, I think, and what you said at the beginning there, I think every single point you made there is genuinely every single point I was going to make throughout this podcast. There's so much depending on this film. It's one of the last of its kind, and numerous different reasons, especially geopolitics that you mentioned. That it'll be interesting to talk about the last James Bond film, especially in connotation with that. But I've always loved this film, and I always remember that. I obviously when I was little, I was born in 1996. You might have to beep that out just for the viewers out there. But I remember that I was a little bit too late for the Cold War. But I remember on the video I had GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies. I think we had The World Is Not Enough, and then we had the Daltons and a lot of Roger Moore's on video. But being little, you just look at the covers, you don't really recognize names and stuff like that. I used to just put them in randomly when I was very little in the VHS player in my room, just play James Bond over and over and over again. The high, even now thinking about it, when it started, United Artists, MGM, Eon, and then we get the gun barrel, and it starts with the beach on Gibraltar. I was like, oh my god, yes, it's this one. I never remembered the name of it. I always loved this, and there's something for a kid to watch this. There's something so romantic about this film as well, and there's echoes. This, like I mentioned, I know it's got a few previous. I don't know if you know this, but the pre-credits title is like a gimmick in itself. They cast one actor look like George Lazenby and one actor look like Roger Moore. So when they take the masks off, like you don't really know who the Bond is, and then when he turns around with that darting look with the hair, like it's such a good introduction, especially in Gibraltar as well, just on a normal mission. But this has so much romanticization because of what came before and after. But I don't think you get GoldenEye without this. Now, GoldenEye touches on a lot of post-Cold War stuff, and it's perfect for that. But for the original trilogy that was Dalton was meant to do, I think there was meant to be a third film that they just couldn't work out. But if you put GoldenEye in connotation with that and work it with this, and License to Kill, but more to this, GoldenEye makes a lot more sense because the opening of GoldenEye is meant to be set in 91, which when he does the bungee jump, which is Dalton. Again, there's like a fake out who it is, the hair, and he comes in and we see it with the bungee rope and stuff like that when he comes into the guy in the toilet. There's a lot of fun there, but that's meant to be. I always thought that was a Dalton, especially with the Russian connection and this with Afghanistan and all sorts of stuff. I think those three work really well as a trilogy. And then Tomorrow Never Dies, World Enough, and Die Another Day sort of work on their own weird little way. But I always romanticize these as being a trilogy. Very dark films, a lot about revenge, a lot about trying to get away from the past, but being drawn back in. Legacy sort of things and themes from Bond that's, again, romanticized a lot more in the Daniel Craig era. But there's something about this, about spending time with the first James Bond again, where you find out him as a character, as a human being. He's fun, he's nasty, and I can't do an impression of him, but Steve Coogan goes, "It's nasty," because he's got a really like a Welsh twang. Timothy Dalton, very Shakespearean, great delivery of dialogue, great screen presence as well, great iconography, great chin, great face, rugged. Like he's a Shakespearean actor, but in the same token, he could be down the pub. Like he's got this great type of character base where he that fabulous nature of James Bond's a spy, yes, and he's from Eton and all sorts and so all that sort of shit. But he's like a very atypical human being as well. But he's got that evil side in these Bond films. Are very devilish. So he's devilish. But again, I'll get back into little bits. But this is the last film within this franchise where it touches on geopolitics within a Cold War since Doctor No, and it goes quite on the nose. I mean, granted, Smersh and Spectre are all reinforced within the Ian Fleming stuff. And yes, we go to Turkey, we talk about Cuba, we go to America and stuff like that. There's a lot more, granted, Russian spies, I can't remember his name, sorry. Richard, it's Grant, or I get it mixed up with the Jaws character. But the villain in From Russia with Love, there's a lot there that in the time is sort of romanticized, whereas this one, especially with what happening in Afghanistan in the 80s, feels very much on the nose, and they've never really done that before. Again, since Danny Boyle was meant to touch on it with No Time to Die with a Russian villain, and they just said no, can't touch this, can't do it. I suppose in hindsight, it's probably a more admirable thing to just stay away from that. But it just gets the impression that not to say that this stuff's I'm woke or anything like that. But when you watch these older Bond films, they feel. I don't know if you get this impression because you're a little bit younger than me, but I lived in a world a little bit before you where there wasn't peace, let's say, but there was a calm before the storm after the Cold War. And I think which is 91. You've lived in a world where it's constant war on terror, and so you could probably say I have for 5 years. I was 5 years in peace as a baby. But we've lived in a world where films have ultimately mirrored this war on terror. The Transformers films, a lot of Ridley Scott stuff. Michael Bay is defined by it. But James Bond began to touch on stuff like that after with Casino Royale, domestic terrorism with a sheaf. The Bond guy, the Bond man ellipsis with Casino Royale with the opening. Um, Skyfall again, domestic terror. Not domestic, but terrorist. Spectre, terrorism. No Time to Die, terrorism. It feels like it's defined by that very nature now. Whereas back then, this was James Bond fighting the Mujahideen against the Soviets. You couldn't do that now. They wouldn't touch it. So it's a wonderful thing to sort of look back on in a very strange type of way where James Bond felt human for the last few times. It'd be interesting to get your opinion on License to Kill next week or whenever you watch License to Kill again, because that goes a lot more deeper into a James Bond psyche that Quantum of Solace then and touched on. And I think License to Kill is a lot better. And I just think so. I think he looks amazing in that film as well. But that's another day. Here, it's James Bond in knee deep in Berlin, knee deep in with the Russians, and knee deep in Afghanistan. True things that was happening at the time, spies. It felt like they had one more chance, inadvertently or not, to really get back into that Sean Connery or more so the Ian Fleming books about a man who was in the Cold War at the time, in Berlin, doing these missions against the Russians, double agents, so on and so forth. So it's really fun to look back on it and be really impressed. I think the action sequences really hold up. The Living Daylights theme tune when it cuts in on the boat, top five. He looks amazing in the tuxedo. We, like you said, we're Czechoslovakia. We're in Berlin. We get everything here. We get car chase. We get the desert chase. We have the opening with a bit of fun with the jet pilot, and we going through the with the I imagine the oil runs or whatever they're called, but it feels like it's very much like we're there, but we spend time with these characters. We evolve. We spend 15 minutes at a fairground, and it's one of the most emotional parts of the film where you think, oh my god, this he is going to fucking kill someone here. There's that wonderful disposition of Dalton where one minute he romanticizes this character and he sort of emotes in such a way where he slowly penetrates, lack of a poor term there, but he slowly penetrates to the hearts of these characters. Yeah, that was poor, wasn't it? I will have to move on in a second because I don't know how I can continue much longer after saying that. But and then 5 minutes later, there's a switch, and I've always found that an actor who can do that in a believable manner is quite disturbed, or at least is understanding of those switches and that how those can change from being romantic and emotionally open to someone withdrawn in a few seconds, and then there's a real time for like, wow, this is going to get quite interesting. I think the writing here is there with him. I think it's a really, really great film. I love the sequence in the MI6 headquarters with a parrot, with a milkman, with a Russian villain. There's a lot here, like after A View to a Kill, where there needed to be a little bit of severity with it and seriousness, but also a moment of brevity and a little bit of not a lukewarmness, but a little bit of entertainment and fun. And I think this is nailed by John Glenn throughout.
No, I mean, I would fully agree. I think number one, John Glenn is probably one of the better Bond directors in general.
Yeah.
But it's really easy to look at this film and I think get lost in, and not necessarily lost in the sense it's not a worthwhile conversation, but I think it's easy to focus on the action, the world building. The action is, I would say, the best Bond has been up to this point. It looks stunning. Every set piece, the size of it, the scale of it. I mean, it turns like Mission Impossible in certain scenes. Like, it really is like that level of like, oh, because before they've always had like an element of practicality and stuff, but it's always looked very cheesy, or it's always looked very rough. And there's a charming ability for that. Certainly, this is the first time where I think the action really truly begins to like lose me in the scale of it. There's a great darkness and tone. But the key here, the thing that really like sold me on this, and also I will say that before I get to that, the sound design in this, I fucking adore. There are
Really
so many times
really good.
where there's not even like a score to this film for extended segments, whether it's him loading the bullets into the gun, or whether it's a car chase, or the trains going over the cobblestone. It sounds immaculate throughout, and I think the sound design is really incredible. But that human element Dalton has this face about him where he will, if he like makes any reaction, the first thing his face does and goes into this like lovable smile that's like, it's not intentional, but it's just infectious. I found Dalton to be such a charming Bond. Yes, he has, again, that serious element. It's not like he's tearing that apart, but I found this character, this interpretation of Bond, to be so likable in a way, in like this human way that I don't really think any actor before him has really nailed or captured. I'm sad that he only got 2 outings as Bond, because I do think he has a lot to him, as you mentioned, with the range of going from the really human element. The romance here, I think, is really strong. I think that's probably one of the stronger romances I've seen in a Bond film. But I think so much of that is on Dalton specifically.
Yes.
And it's just, I don't know, man. He just has that face. I also am like so sad, just even outside of Bond, he hasn't, seemingly done a ton of stuff to really dive into. That's really worthwhile, at least from what I've seen, because like, I don't know, he has that it factor. He really commands the screen, and is super fun. But I think that balance is really what's felt throughout the film. This is probably one of the strongest. We talked about this a lot with Thunderball, where Bond films often get into the struggle of identity between, you want to be this crime thriller, but you also want to have the romance, and you want to have the fun, and you want to have that blending of these tones. And I think this movie just nails it. I think even more so than even like On Her Majesty's Secret Service, where I think largely due to the kind of some of the production things of the time, with some of the chases and stuff, I think it gets lost a little bit in some of the campiness. I think this really holds tight. It's a very exciting watch. I mean, it's thrilling, and I think also the geopolitics plays into that. It's a really good threat for him to have. I mean,
Yes,
it reads as different,
yeah.
especially at a time where like so many of these Bond films of this era, it almost becomes like villain of the week, where it's like, okay, what's going to be, especially with some of the last few films, you have a villain that is overtly campy and overtly maybe threatening, but also definitely playing into comedy. Here it just like, it has a different vibe to it. It's just so different in a way that connects. I mean, to this day, I think it holds up as probably one of the more like engrossing Bond films when it comes to the actual conflict on screen.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Dalton for a second, because I'm going to sort of stumble my way through this, but I'm try and make a point in fruition if you'll go with me. I think out of all the casting throughout every Bond that's been here, I think the only one that has known more before going in than has come out of it is Dalton. Now, a lot of people think that when Bond is cast, is relatively unknown, which, to be fair, is somewhat true. I mean, Connery was somewhat unknown, became Bond. Roger Moore was well known in the UK before, but became Bond and skyrocketed. Lazenby, I think that's a story in its own right. Pierce Brosnan, I think, was in a few bits and pieces when became international with James Bond, and then Daniel Craig is very similar, worked very local in the UK, then was beginning to do Layer Cake and so on and so forth, and then bang, Bond blew up. Dalton is not that type of character. Dalton in 1969, 1968 had auditioned for this and was like the second person to get on a Majesty's Secret Service, but he was like 21, 22, is far too young. And instead, I mean, he's a Shakespearean trained actor as well. I'm not discrediting any of the other actors who have done it, but in 1970 something, he was in while like they're doing Diamonds Are Forever. He was Mary Queen of Scots, with the likes of like powerhouses of his time. Played Hamlet on stage, just honing this craft of Shakespearean type of delivery, how he holds himself on screen, totally immortalizing in the works of people who came before him on stage, but incredibly rich actors who had been immortalized themselves in certain performances week in, week out. So this is an actor who didn't grow up in the idea of on screen in terms of growing and evolving with the character itself. He came into this rather fully fledged in a multifaceted range of character actor, playing villains, heroes, scoundrels, so on and so forth. Now, not to discredit the other actors here, but Dalton's filmography beforehand is far more weighted onto probably the same type of weight that I would probably say Sean Connery was on like likes of The Hill and stuff like that. But then obviously went on to go work with Sidney Lumet. But this is different. This was someone coming into the role who was preconditioned with the idea of, I know how to play this. you'll let me play this because I know that I want to evoke a Connery type of character, but also understanding the literature itself. Again, I think coming from a Shakespearean background. And I think before long, it became evidently clear that there's one person running these two films, and that's Timothy Dalton. And I think that's what makes these two so strong back to back, because it's an actor who's come into it who knows how to play this character. Connery grows into it. So does Roger Moore, as we spoke about, A Man with a Golden Gun. Those films get better. Connery becomes disillusioned with it, but Bond, Daniel Craig, blossoms into it. Pierce Brosnan, you could argue, again becomes disillusioned, but grows into the Bond caricature. This is not the same thing here. This is someone who nails it first time around, and I would say almost to a perfection. There are sequences in here, and again, I'm not trying to blow smoke up his ass. He's an incredibly talented actor, but I look at this on certain occasions where I see him knowing full well that we know the lore to this character. So every single time this character lets its guard down and he becomes romanticized with this woman, he remembers Tracer. And every time the man lets his guard down, something happens. There's this feeling on this man's face, this character who knows why this has happened before. Stop doing it again. Stop falling into the trap of hope or romance or any form of affection. This is what happens. And I see that it's not only sort of a character thing that granted has come from Magic Secret Service, but I also look at it as a narrative basis of who understands the law, that understands the heritage of this character, who knows that this is a nasty man. He's not. Granted, I know I've said that you can see him in a pub, you could see him anywhere else, and I think there's an interesting element to that of an everyday type of Bond. But in the same token, there is a switch here where once it is pulled, it becomes quite frightening. And I think that only the person who's come close to that is Daniel Craig. When you watch the opening of Quantum of Solace, that is someone who, as a character, has the switch has been pulled, and there's no reining him back in. That is it. It's over. But there's an experience with Quantum, and I would say No Time to Die not so much, but definitely with Quantum and Casino Royale, where that character is very new, very susceptible to raw emotion. This is not the case. This is a man who's done it for maybe 15, 20 years within that context of that character, and that richness. It just broods out so much. I mean, there's never a sequence here that it does not feel like he's in total control. And sometimes when you watch these characters, I mean, granted, the old age thing, narrative has to take over. You can't have a sensibility when you're watching this sort of stuff, because ultimately you wouldn't go in a dark room, would you? If you hear a monster down in your bedroom, you don't look under the bed. But within here, I never felt that as a character, he was not in control. He's one step ahead of everything. He knows every step to go forward. I've always really liked that here. I like that he's not ever swarmy either. He's not a gobshite. He's very limited. I think License to Kill, he has a lot more dialogue there because he's trying to play a triple agent, which is another fabulous thing of that film. But like you said here, like there's just so much richness here. And I think when License to Kill ended, and there's a conversation, I know they're in financial issues at this point, Eon, MGM and stuff like that, who then buy it off United Artists. I can understand that there's a certain point in time where they come to him with something else, and I think I get the impression. I don't know about you because I know you haven't seen License to Kill in a while, but I get the strong impression that he understands full well what they're trying to do, which is reiterate the same constant shit of revenge, and grief and going after someone again. The same issue that happened with the Craig era, and the same thing that they tried to sort of get away with the Brosnan stuff, but it's still there, but it's just a little bit different. But they can't escape from it in Casino Royale further on because it works so well. I think the same thing happened here. They nailed it first time around. So what did they have to do? We'll change the characters around, but we'll have the same thing. I get the strong impression they came to him a third time. And it is an incredibly sophisticated actor, and just thought, I'm not going to play the same thing three times. We have to have something different. And I know there's a book about his unrealized projects. I know there was meant to be one that was meant in China and all sorts of stuff. And I think GoldenEye was such a success in contemporary times, but also I think even now, retrospectively, I think it still holds up. But very much like we had this chat about Diamonds Are Forever and Majesty's Secret Service, there just feels like an opportunity slightly missed there that in hindsight would have prospered so much more in a different form of texture rather than it working very well as standard now, no issue. But those three films coming together feel like they bookend really well. He has the fights with the Russians here. He has a personal tragedy in the second film. And the third film, the Russian thing ends, but it's still there. There's still a severity there, a seriousness about it. It never quite leaves you, these sort of things. Bygone be bangers, but I get the impression that Dalton sort of outgrows this very quickly, which is a shame because I think they were hoping that they would have someone who would ultimately become dependable on them. And I think at the time, there being financial issues, it was very much the other way around. They were dependable on Dalton, and they shit on Brosnan at the end with Die Another Day. He had another film, and they said no because of the issues there, which I think is somewhat unfair. But he obviously played him in Everything or Nothing, the video game as well. So you could say there's five films, but I agree with you what you said earlier about it feels like he's the forgotten man, and I've always wondered why. When I play these Bond films with my mum, my dad, and my sister, watched it with Sunshine, my wife, this morning. Little bits of it she was watching. You know, my dad doesn't like these two films. My sister does to a certain degree, but she prefers Charles Bronson. My sister's a bit older than I am. I don't know a lot of people who are warm to this film as probably I am, or even to you. It's always muddled my opinion of why. I've never quite understood that. Is it because it's too dark? But you look at the Craig movies, it's not very light-hearted, yes, but I wouldn't have sort of said the Brosnan films were. And I think people sort of it's in that really weird place where you mentioned this brilliantly earlier, is that, and I sort of said it as well, boots on the ground. There's no silly sidekick here. There's no silly villain. These are people scheming for real world issues. We'll get to the John Doe Baker thing because that's the only caveat I've got about it, but we'll get there again. But I get the impression that this came in an era where it came after silliness, and then it came again a little bit with the Brosnan stuff, where it'd be like, right, okay, we've got Famke Jensen who's killing people, having sex. It's just like very much Bond, but that's a very Connery type of thing. And then we get into like Tomorrow Never Dies, which is like again Jason Bourne era. Then we're getting into like World Is Not Enough, which got Goldie playing the villain. Robert Carlyle's got a bullet in his brain. And we get into Die Another Day where it gets like really silly. There was an era where it was I think it was just surrounded by what people not necessarily liked, but were just warm to. If that makes any sense, like that's what they were given. So that's what we like. And I think in retrospect, these films will just get better and better and better. I mean, anyone who sits here and goes, "Oh, Craig's better than Dalton," needs to get their head screwed off. Like, you've got to realize that the breadcrumbs all lead to this for what the next generation of Bond will be. This is it. This is the archetype of that character. Connery was its own thing. Roger Moore had its own thing. This then brought a second wind to it. There's no Brosnan without this. There's no GoldenEye, as I said. No Tomorrow Never Dies. So I'll end it. I'll throw it back to you where you want to go for. But I think the sound design, this, like you said, the soundtrack by Aha. Why can't we bring the boy bands back? Why did I love the Shirley Bassey renditions of Bond. Like that is so Bond to me. But A View to a Kill, Duran Duran, perfect. Aha, Living Daylights, amazing. A License to Kill's terrific as well. When they cut to the from the opening credits to the titles, these films look amazing, and it's the old fashioned Bond girls on screen as well. No digital shit like they did with Tomorrow Never Dies. With GoldenEye, it feels very much like the last of its era. But I go back to this and I just think like a truly scary side villain as well, like that the big blonde Russian who will go to literally end of the earth to get you, and that thing with the boo at the end. Yes, I just love all the romanticization about it, and like you said, John Glenn really got his flowers with these two, and then I would say probably got shit on a little bit, but it felt like the last hurrah of a very different era. And I think after 91, they probably would have been somewhat skeptical about where do we put Bond now. But these are two terrific films.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't see the influences from this. I mean, maybe even if it's not the direct, like, oh, this is the big thing that people are jumping
Mhm.
off of. But if you don't see how this is the first domino, not even just to Goldeneye, but to the Craig films, to, I would genuinely say, a lot of modern action, I think you're kind of turning on some blinders for that. I don't really know why people don't like this one. I also noticed that on my letterbox where a
Yeah,
lot
it's
of
very
people were giving
strange.
this very mixed reviews. I don't understand that. It has seemingly everything you would want from like a James Bond film. It's also wild to compare this and specifically on Her Majesty's Secret Service and comparing the experience of Lazenby and comparing the experience to Dalton, because I think in a lot of ways those narratives, when it comes to ownership of the character, when it comes to having this personal, the actor defining the character, a lot of that just feels like a repeated conversation, which is disappointing that both then fell out of love. And when it came to that debate and that back
Yeah.
and forth, they both left the character. I don't need this character. I'm not this character. Because I think both are like, if we could go back in time, and there's a lot of great Bond, man, that mindset certainly could have produced some interesting work and some really rewarding stuff. But I also don't want to make it seem like Dalton's the only person on cast. We will certainly talk about the American without every single one of these earlier ones.
Let's
It
go
seems
in
like the
there.
American is the rough part, but I do want to mention quickly Kara. I really like her in this as the
Yes.
Bond girl. She brings a wonderful texture, a very interesting, like, just presence. I feel like compared to a lot of the Bond girls, where it's not so much tied. It's a lot more, I think, sensual at times compared to just overt sexiness and skin, but in a way that I found to be very, very, like, I think her and Dalton had wonderful chemistry. I thought she really fleshed out something wonderful there. The villains here are pretty good. But yeah, I mean, we should talk about Joe Don Barker because, yes, again, just like the last one, the American really is the rough spot. I would say this is definitely where, and he just called his character, he said his character thought he was Napoleon. It does go very over the top a lot of the times in a way that I don't think gels with the rest of the film. Luckily, I think he's enough to where, like, enough to the side to where it's certainly not going to ruin the experience or ruin the threat for anyone. But those scenes are certainly the weakest aspects, I would say, of the film.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to talk about the Bond girl because I think with James Bond, there's an either or. I think they either have the Bond girl, which is who can play very much against him in the sense of, while he plays a masculine, plays the incredibly feminine. And then they also do the bit where they have someone who can literally go toe to toe with him. And depending on how you sort of see your Bond girls, they usually cast both of them now. They usually cast, let's say in let's say in Skyfall, they cast a French woman as the feminine to him, and then they cast obviously the Judi Dench who can go toe to toe with him, and the likes of Quantum. You've got Olga Kurlenko, I've probably butchered that, who goes toe to toe. Then you've got Gemma Arterton, who's a feminine. Casino Royale, somewhat similar with the Italian lady at the beginning, and Eva Green. And then you've got the same thing with Spectre. If it's Monica Bellucci, the feminine, then you've got Lea Seydoux who plays. And I'm not trying to say that the opposing is masculine in any way. What I mean is that they write two opposing characters in the sense that one plays into Bond and one plays opposite him in the sense that there's definitely a chemistry, a bond there, that pardon the pun, but someone who can give it to him as good as he gives out. And I think Lea Seydoux does it perfect. But that's and again they do it again with Latasha Lynch, and then the twist Lea Seydoux' character in No Time to Die, if you will. But this film only really has one, and that's the feminine. And when I watch this, I always get wrapped up into this fact that she's not only naively innocent in this film, but she's incredibly unaware of everything going around her. She falls into this trap of someone taking advantage of her, let's say. And when Bond enters this picture, you get the impression that Bond, as what would be written, would also take advantage to this character in probably more ways than one. But we don't need to get into it. That's the writing of the book, let's say, or the Ian Fleming of its time. But within Dalton's archetype here, it's more so that he sort of sees something that's obviously he needs because he needs to track down this villain and uses her as a scapegoat. But in the same token, he's always seemed to be very soft with her. He goes back for the for the. I always love that. Like he's in the car and he tells her
cello,
no.
yeah.
Yeah, and he goes back for the cello. Like she warms his heart. He's this bitter British bastard or this Welsh bastard, and he goes back for the child. I always love that detail. The first sign of like, okay, he has a soft spot for her. He knows he shouldn't do, and that's not what should be happening here. But he has a soft spot. I always love that little bit. And on the Ferris wheel as well, there's always this lovely bit. And then when he gets poisoned and like he's just he has this very softness with her, but she plays it so well that she's so wonderfully naive, and they have this wonderful warm relationship where he looks out for her, he protects her, and he doesn't. It's just one of those bits in this character where, again, this multifaceted development where he can see someone quite innocent to the party, and will only allow them to get so far into it so they can still walk away. In very interesting detail. But let's talk about John Doe Baker. So the American thing is interesting because obviously the geopolitics is that the Americans ultimately, a history lesson for everyone in ClapperCast here, so just sit down. But obviously in the 80s, the Soviets invade Afghanistan. The Afghanistan have rebels called the Mujahideen, who are partly funded by Saudi Arabians and partly funded by the US, which is a proxy war, which is ultimately the same thing that's happened in Ukraine, and something also that's happened in another part of the world that is just not. Again, it's just something that's happening. It happens in a lot throughout the countries. It happens in Africa a lot, but it's proxy wars. So the Americans go in and they fund someone called Osama bin Laden and someone else. They form the Mujahideen. So the idea in this film is that the American is actually working with the Afghanis, working against the Afghanis to prosper the war through the Russian side. Very interesting, and interesting duplicity there that works against type, especially during the time, which I think this is the end of the Soviet war anyway, but there's still remnants of it. Because obviously in '91 they go and invade Kuwait, don't they? I might get wrong there. There's so many invasions of the US, so I do pardon my fun there. But there's like yeah, yeah. We condemn all that sort of shit. Don't worry. But there's this thing where there's an interesting conversation there about. Again, this is subtext, so that's not. But it's overtly context within the film. There's a subtext there. There's a lot of people in these wars that don't want these wars to end. Financial profit. We're all very aware of that now, especially in modern days when Congress gets lined their pockets with an invasion. If it's Boeing or whoever who make bombs, makes planes, someone makes a killing off it. And to juxtapose that and have an American in this who's not meant to really be there, who's basically a missionary in his own right, but also prosper from it. I always think as a narrative thing, it's very interesting. The execution, on the other hand, is a little bit too larger than life. And I think the impression of that is because what we just spoke about is quite serious. And I think this film is talking about Bond working with rebels who are funded by the US that nobody really can talk about and nobody can really have a conversation with or about, albeit that people know it's probably happening in retrospect. But to the same degree, I think they've got to sort of blow this up a little bit, that he's got to be removed from the US military might, hasn't he? He's got to be his own person. And you've also got to show a sort of a deranged ideology that he has, because no American person would want that war to happen, because nobody wants those things to happen. And I think they go about it the wrong way with a tad of over dramaticness. But I've always quite liked John Doe Baker as an actor. I think he comes back around in GoldenEye, which is a very strange casting as well. And he works for the CIA, which I think is just bonkers. I don't mind the character until you get to the actual shootout, where it's like the laser shit there for the next war and stuff. And I appreciate the egotistical type of deranged character who sees himself and the remnants of bygone eras of dictators and nutters. There's a funness there that's interesting, but there is this larger than life approach, probably to pull it away from arguably the severity of the actual narrative itself. The Russian general is an interesting one, because this feels like a attribute of Roger Moore's era towards the end, especially with the likes of Octopussy, where the Russians want the war, the Russian government won't give these generals the war, and he's doing like he's selling like gold and stuff, and from remnants of World War Two, and there's interesting things there, I suppose. But this hungry generals and Russian generals who want to prosper, if it's the same old story, I suppose. But I never felt the issue. I think the strongest part there, again, and what we mentioned, is the henchman. Fabulous, so simple. They tried to do it once more, and Tomorrow Never Dies with the German, and a part of me is like, oh, okay, but it just feels like an Arnold Schwarzenegger clone at times. There, it's like, like it's ruthlessly nasty for the sake of being ruthlessly nasty. Yet here, this guy is just like built to do these jobs, and I quite like the approach where he opposes Bond. Bond's brunette, this guy's blonde. Bond's not very tall. This guy's tall. Bond's not very not very like a bodybuild figure. This guy does. Bond is very loud and proud. This guy isn't. He has a consciousness about not consciousness, but a precision to it. How he does the how he goes in and gets the house and does it the way he does, and you see Bond's equivalent of that at the end, just shooting everything up. There's an interesting parallel opposing dichotomy there that I like. But yeah, I think the casting here is really good as well. Very much believable, and even with the John Doe Baker excess, I still think it works to a certain degree. And it does. It does though. It's so on a thin line that the finale when he goes to fight him on his own, it just feels like when he gets the laser gun out, I'm like, oh, maybe we could have just reined that back in. But it is still 1989, and things are getting crazy, aren't they?
I mean, they're literally driving plane or cars onto planes and stuff, and then having it fall out. So there's a little bit of it,
Fast
like
and Furious there, Fast and Furious 6. That's where Justin Lin got that from, I'm sure.
I think there's something we said though about like I don't think that these individual elements per se are necessarily like in a vacuum the worst thing ever. I think when we look at Golden Gun, for example, the henchmen there and stuff, it's like, okay, that's like overtly bad in any circumstance. I think here they stand out more because to be clear, all the golden gun stands out there, don't worry, I still stand with you more than I do not. But, we got to admit some faults occasionally. But I think these issues blow up when you put them in the context of what the rest of this movie is, which is so grounded and it's so just bringing a certain energy that these elements are not. The laser gun does not. And I would say some of the campy moments throughout. I mean, I saw some people on Letterboxd being like, this movie's entirely camp, and I obviously do not agree with that. But I do think some of those scenes, some of the more remnants, let's say, just stand out a little bit more just because the rest of the film is operating on a very different level. But it's not that the actual character of the performance or the scene itself, if it was in a different film, would stand out as being particularly bad. So I respect it at least for that. I really don't know if there's any part of this film I would say is like actively like the worst thing ever, where I'm like, this is going to be in any circumstance a terrible choice or a terrible move. I think it all at least would work in some circumstance, which I can't say about I think any other Bond film we've talked about. So that's a positive. As far as the ending, I mean, I don't know if we need to get too deep into the ending. There's obviously the conclusion to the action and then the actual final like couple scenes. I love the ending of this film, I must admit. Like the final scenes of it's not necessarily something narratively brand new for Bond. Maybe it's just I feel like the chemistry between these characters are fantastic. But it is probably one of the more satisfying conclusions I've felt from one of these Bond films. Doesn't obviously have like the twist of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, to where it just elevates itself to something entirely new. But that is something that really sticks out to me, is how satisfying the conclusion here feels. And I like the action scene at the end too. I mean, I think it's not quite as unique as obviously like Thunderball's underwater sequence. But I find it very captivating. I think sometimes Bond in that third act really can struggle to find a solid conclusion. Going back to the Golden Gun, I like the concept there. I do think it's a little bit weak where it just wraps up very quickly, and I think it doesn't necessarily stick the landing. Here, I think it does. So I would also just like celebrate that portion of the film compared to the other ones around it.
Yeah, I mean, if we were going to be like really, really cutting here, you could argue the fact of, you have the big set piece on the plane, very climactic, cuts a bootlace off, which I think is a great bookend to the opening of the film, where one of his agents gets the cutting of the like obviously with his rope. What would have made that better is that if the actual villain henchman was the guy who did all these two friends at the beginning, and he didn't kill him. And I think that would be in a stronger bookend because you get like a really good. Granted, he kills another one of his friends as well. They have a really interesting relationship as well, and I appreciate that. But I think it would have been a lot stronger if he killed the two people in Gibraltar. I think that's what would make that very, very like a lot stronger with a parallel. But I agree with you. They get into the Land Rover when it lands the plane, and they go to he's driving to goes up to he knows like good house in Pakistan. I can't remember what the name is. There's a Pakistani curry house named it. I can't remember what the name is in Bradford. It's a name as a city in Pakistan. I keep on thinking Marrakesh, but it's not because that's in somewhere else. Anyway, but the point being, like, it feels like that would be like the driving off in the sunset, and I feel like you could say there's an additional bit about when he goes to Art Malik comes back as the Mujahideen fighter, which again, any True Lies fans out there, he plays a villain there as well. Great range, but I think you could argue like, oh right, we're having a tacked on in here, but I think, like you said, it's not even about the homage to a Majesty's Secret Service. It's just quite nice to have something that's a little bit more earnest, a little bit more like people coming together. I mean, they come in with the culture and the guns, and they're all like, "Oh my god, no, no, can't come in here," and stuff like that. And but there's like not necessarily like a coming together. I know that that's very trivial, but it feels like there's an attempt to at least be like different cultures, different type of social elements. Still celebrating because they can be friends and they've gone through something, and he's still there and he sees her. There's a loveliness there because I think you get the idea that Bond is very aloof as well. He always goes missing at the end. He's not really there, and the fact he comes back and he's. I always agree with you. I've always quite found that quite like emotionally rich. Anyway, I've always felt like it earned that spot. They've gone through a hell of a lot together, heartbreak and all. But yeah, I think you could probably say it's a bit like not anticlimactic, but added on. But the one thing I wanted to mention though about the score within Bond, you can always tell when they've got a fucking great song when it's reiterated through the actual score. Diamonds Are Forever does it. Goldfinger does it. Doctor No does it. Obviously with the Bond theme tune. From Russia with Love does it. You Only Live Twice does it as well. There's a lot of Bond films. Man with the Golden Gun, The Spy Who Loved Me as well. But there's a lot of really, really, really great. A View to a Kill did it as well, where there is like this thing where they have the theme song within the score, and it's played with the orchestra. They do it here, and I think it's the best use of it throughout the whole franchise. A few years ago, the Royal Symphony Orchestra from London did all Bond theme tunes through just through the orchestra, from Doctor No to No Time to Die. This and A View to a Kill, outstanding. There's a beauty to this, a simplicity to it throughout the score where it just gets me every single time. The View to a Kill one is outstanding. They do the rendition of when again when I know we're not here for this, but when From Roger Moore at like 65 is coming down the ladder of the fire engine. There's a score of the theme tune of Duran Duran at View to a Kill. It is outstanding in the film, but when it's played in the orchestra, it sounds even better. When I visited France last year, I used it on my Instagram post. I love the song; it's amazing. When you play it really loud with headphones, it's so gripping. But this by Aha is outstanding as well. There's something about that era where the melding of an old age character at this point, who is at least in his 20s, if not going into his 30s here, as a character, as a franchise, melding with newfound pop music, and seemingly works. And I know a lot of people who are diehard fans who are from an older generation obviously won't appreciate this. Very much like I think the Billie Eilish thing's atrocious, and you know what I mean. Like I don't know what that's all about. Like it's just someone moping into and doesn't can you do it louder, please? Like, what? You know what I mean? Like, I appreciate it's depressed, but come on, let's fucking get on with it. I always like the Shirley Bassey where they just go for it. The Tom Jones Thunderball, really bring everything up and make it a sequence in itself, make it a scene. Like Matt Monroe. But again, with Living Daylights, it just sounds amazing. I love the song as well. I just want to mention that because I think there's lovely ripples here, and David Arnold does it quite a lot with his scores, but he never did it with Quantum Lock. There's a little bit of Casino Royale, but there's not a lot with Quantum. But they're very good scores in their own right, and the Skyfall one is in its own right. And Spectre's used a lot as well, Writing on the Wall, which is quite fabulous. If you listen to that instrumental, no
Yeah.
disrespect to Sam Smith, but there's a really great richness to this score as well, and I think A License
Oh,
to
yeah.
Kill is perfect. Um, yeah, I must admit, from what you mentioned, it is quite difficult to find negatives here, and I'm trying to think it without my Bond eyesight on. I'm trying to think of it, but I quite like the Aston Martin chase. I think
Yeah.
that's cool when they go on this little sled on their own. I think that's fun.
Yeah,
I
I
just
agree.
I think that the one thing that this film gets a lot of, not pushback, they say, but a form of negativity is that it's too serious. It's too serious. Oh, we need to lighten the load here. It's too serious. And I watch this and I find loads of moments here where it's like, as no one mentioned here, like they're taking the piss out of themselves, like they're having fun here. Like the fact, do you ever see the edit where the Bond sees the aircraft carrier go, the jet go, and it flies through the other guy's head?
Oh no, I don't
You
think
notice
so.
that edit there? Fabulous bit of a bit of a comedy there, physical comedy. The guy's plan, who's organised all this for the jet to make it all work, Bond comes in, disrupts it all because he doesn't want to be in the boot of the cat, of which they check. Bond was always right. And when it goes into the other side of Germany and he gets into the jet goes up, and as the both Bond and his friend are looking over the other agent, the jet flies through the guy's head. And,
Amazing.
yeah, no, exactly. I think it's I mean, John Glenn's an editor in his own right, edited a
Right.
few things before this, so that there's no way that's not conscious. I always thought it's only just getting the rounds on Twitter again. I looked the other day, just very strict, just like, oh, Living Daylights, we're doing that next, and it came up. It's like, oh, maybe someone's listening, maybe not. I don't know. We'll get into it another day. But I just love that fabulous little bit there, a little bit of comedy, and I think because these films with Dalton have this approach of very like a serious type of nature, I think people are not willing to meet it halfway and be like, there
Mm.
is some silliness. I mean, the cello, like he moves like that with the cello,
Yeah.
like he's on the case. How does not that's like tongue in cheek, like firmly in place. Like, oh, I know a great Karachi. That's it, Karachi.
There.
I know a great restaurant in Karachi. He's going to drive for it 400, 500 miles. Like, there's a form of fun here, and I just don't think anyone wants to approach them with that. But
Sure.
I was thinking about. I know I keep on going on here, but it keeps on coming up and up and up and up. I can't stop talking about. I love this film, and granted, and those people say I'm negative. Listen to this one, will you? Listen to this. But one thing, Carson, because we were talking about this slightly earlier about why this film gets lost. I get the impression this is a generational thing now, and I think it's the same thing that happened with Connery, that happened with Moore, and it's now happened with Dalton, because they've got two newer generations of films which look fresher, sound fresher, have more technological gifts to it, especially with the Brosnan era, and Craig having an arc. The only reason why you would go back to this or you would find this is a completionist or someone who would want to watch, oh, like there's another James Bond, let's watch that. I don't think this is aged at all poorly. I think it still stands the tell of time, especially with its age. I think this is actually better than maybe two Brosnan films, not just for age, just for the practicality of production. I also think it's better than at least two, if not three, Daniel Craig films. This is solid. But I feel like this gets lost out because the Brosnan stuff has such a wide range of age. It starts in very theatrical, boots on the ground, and gets to an incredibly theatrical space sort of shit. Daniel Craig's is somewhat similar. We get back down to basics and we go big, 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 and we blow up an island and he dies. But that's a more you're in there for four films and getting used to that character of five films. I feel like this gets forgotten about because why go back to someone who who is a character? We want to see explosions, and it's ultimately the same thing that happened with the Fast and Furious franchise, which is I know is a reach, but let me go with it. I think a lot of people will go to that franchise now, and it knows itself. And I'm not dissing this, whatever. So they got the bag. Welcome to it. But I get the strong impression that those films became bigger than the characters, and once that happens, you can't really go back from that because you're looking for the spectacle, not for the not from the not the sincerity. And that's why when John Cena comes back as his brother, nobody gives a shit. Because didn't he had a brother who died in the first film, was shot at the house. No one gives a shit about that anymore, do they? Like, no one gives a shit, because why would we? Because no one's there for that anymore, and they can get away with that. They're in space. Fuck John Cena. Yes, accept it. Paul Walker might be back. Excellent. But we're going to space this one. And I get this strong impression that Bond for a long time held that root of, you are here for the guy's name under the title. You're not here for the title. That's changed a little bit now. And we'll talk about this again, not to bring it into the Amazon stuff, which we do every week. No update as usual. But I'm hoping that strong feeling of, if it's Patrick Gibson, if it's whoever, David Johnson, we've got to go for that person. If we go for spectacle, this is lost already. It has to deviate from the richness of everything else, And I think a lot of great sci-fi movies, or not sci-fi movies, but even a lot of action movies, like the Die Hards, people want to Die Hard for 1-3 specifically for Bruce Willis. They wanted to see him as John McClane. The fact that those films are great films in their own right is a factor of, we're there for watching Bruce Willis. I think for at least 3 of them, I think the same was for Matt Damon, and I think a lot of it was for early MCU shit. And I don't say that term loosely. I say that with cold-hearted facts. I think a lot of it was the same there, but once the spectacle approaches, the character becomes ultimately a part of the scenery. And I don't think you can ever really get that back, because you can't go back boots on the ground. I mean, they try to do it with Alien Romulus, and it does work, but you have to have different characters. You can't go to a certain point and bring them back down again. You couldn't. I mean, well, to be fair, they did this. They actually they did it with Roger Moore, didn't they? Went to space as Roger Moore, and then the next movie, he was in Greece fighting against a Greek, oligarch and stuff like that. I mean, you can do it, I suppose, but those are different days. That's the 70s. This we're talking about 1989. I just hope that, again, when we spoke about Her Majesty's Secret Service and this and Casino Royale, these films, there's got to be a form of relying on these characters, these actors who play this character. If you write them with enough detail, enough credit, they're really still interesting characters. Although you can argue that it's one note, but I don't find this to be one note. I don't find the man who literally tries to save Vesper in Venice, who then knows he can't do it, who is grieving for like 30 seconds because he knows if he falls into that trap past 30 seconds, that's it. He cannot come back from it. These characters are really interesting if they're performed by layers of emotional torment and abuse. So just interesting, but like I said, I just hope that they just remember that these films with Dalton are really great character pieces, and Bond's on a high when they're always playing character.
I mean, I would say there's a lot of meat left on these bones. Not to take anything out of the James Bond franchise, but out of 25 films, I would argue maybe 7 or 8 or 9, let's say, really like dive into this character and do a lot with him. I think there's still so much you can do with this character as far as like arc and depth, and maybe it is often one note, but I don't think there's any reason, as seen in so many of these films we've talked about, and we could talk about the Craig franchise and stuff. I think there's no reason it has to stay one note. So I'm very hopeful about the potential of James Bond. Maybe I'm not so, hopeful about the expectations of the people behind it and them actually living up to those expectations. But I think there's certainly more you can do with this character that would be worthwhile and interesting. Before we move on, go for it.
No, I was just going to say that there's very few films where I get the impression where they've actually taken this character to the emotional brink. And I know they flirted with it, like they flirted with it in Spectre. They flirted with it, I'll say. But I get this. I never really got the impression where they will push this character to the brink of what is right, what is wrong. They've never pushed him to really blur the lines between, is it for you or is it for country? What are you doing here? And I think License to Kill gets close. I think that Quantum gets somewhat close. Casino Royale as well. but there's very few within this era. I mean, maybe like it's like when you look at Die Another Day or Spectre, and you think they just like they had the opportunity to really push this character who gets forgotten about and is lost within this world, and like who are we actually fighting for? Who are we fighting here? You're fighting for the same government that's ultimately a part of these projects. Like it's never pushed this character, and I feel like with you talking about like there does feel like a lot of meat on the bones. I mean, relationship wise, it does feel like it's slightly you know not done, but you can have fun with it still. And granted, you don't have to make that character so depressing. You can have a multifaceted character who's enjoyable to watch and still have retain some sort of like thought and feeling. Like it just needs someone who can write a character. My issue is like with Stephen Knight coming on board. I know this story is by Malibam and Michael G. Wilson, who've obviously been with the character for a while. My issue with Stephen Knight from the Peaky Blinders era is that if you watch the Peaky Blinders and he had 4 seasons of it, and he wrote that character as a development in the long run. And then if you watch like The Immortal Man, and it's like, you got away with it because you had 4 seasons of it. You maybe had 40 hours of material before it, and you earned that a little bit. But if you watch that film isolated, it doesn't work because you don't have that energy and that empathy for a character who's gone through actual turmoil. My worry with this Stephen Knight is that I think in the same approach is that they're not going to go through the really good character moments, and that we're just going to jump him there. We're going to give him shit to deal with, break his heart, and then we'll see the result of it. To me, it's just, he might be the wrong man to get to do this film. I think I don't want someone who comes into it like fucking, what's the guy's face out of Amazing Spider-Man, the Forgotten Man. What's he called, Carson?
Oh God. 500 Days of Summer.
They brought in a guy who worked with characters and relationship type of material, and that really transferred to those characters. Those films are not very good, but though that dynamic is always blocked. Mark Webb. I mean, irony there. I never realised that, but maybe he's working on double time there. But I get this. When you watch those films, the best part of those films are the dynamic between the two main characters. I'm not trying to suggest that Mark Webb should be writing and directing a James Bond film, but the point remains, I think, that they need people who can work with characters on a dynamic basis and not someone who has long form material, because that's not really afforded to a 2-hour runtime anymore. That's my only worry. And I think one thing going forward, what I think works well with the Dalton era and as well with the Brosnan era, and was sort of like just taken too far with the Craig, is that let's just stop having arcs long form. We don't need. I know I've just said like this is a trilogy, and like I don't think it works as one per se. It's not written as one, but it works as one. What should I say? But individual stories where we give him an arc here, an arc there. I don't want long form trauma anymore. We've done that now. I don't want to see for 3 films Chris Evans pondering about someone who's fucking gone. Like whatever her name is, Penny. I don't know. Penny Carter. Is it Penny Carter? Peggy Carter. I'm not. I don't. No disrespect to that, but it's like it's boring after a while. Like you've got to either investigate that or drop it. Or you can have it as lingering, but it's just looking at the piece and then we cut away. It's like, oh, we've got to remind ourselves because we like 30-second clips on TikTok. I do apologize. Yes. Especially I can't remember her name, so I need to watch those films all again. I need to watch 159 hours of that sort of shit. So I'll be doing your marathon with you as well, which I'm seeing you having so much fun. Carson off air is like he's so looking forward to these Marvel movies. You don't know. He texts me all the time about it. I'm like, Carson, I love you to pieces, but you've got to stop trying to get me involved in the Marvel stuff. But no, back to Bond.
I mean, it's like how when you were watching Phantom Menace, you sent me 10 cuts of it when you watched those back to back. Like, it's rough always.
Yeah, anyway, moving on from that, I will say I did watch this early in the year in January in 35mm as well. It looked gorgeous. I'd love to see these back in the cinema. I mean, they just play really well, don't they, landscape?
Oh, totally.
I mean, like at night when we're in places or in Afghanistan, I think how, not to move on from Phantom Menace that quickly, but I'm glad that we're into it here. But there were bad days, really bad days. That was a Psychosis episode. I think we've all agreed that was like a really bad... I was screaming for help there. I was screaming for help.
And everyone was too afraid to reach out.
Yeah. That was just, I was like, please, someone just check up on me. Jack, okay? Watching Attack of the Clones 3 times. Like, you just needed to stop, Jack. Anyway, they were there in the end for me. Anyway, anyway, moving on. But I think one thing about John Glenn's film here as well is the image. I think it's presented really well. He's as a someone who's from an edited point of view. I'm always very fascinated when someone jumps from, not me, but from someone who jumps in from an editor to a director, which usually is like writer to director or actor to director. Someone who's like worked with the material hands on, who's formulating these characters. But yet, in the same way, an editor does a very similar type of job, but works with a range of material, very much like a screenwriter, I would say, who then makes that jump, like the Aaron Sorkin thing. Bad example, because whatever that is we need to move on from that immediately, because they're tough films to watch in their own right. But when I look at John Glenn, I'm not. I don't want to say shocked, because that feels like it's diminishing returns. But I look at the Afghanistan scenes, especially in the airplane. He always gets the image. He understands where to put it. The Gibraltar stuff always looks really good. His blocking's like interesting. It's never like perfect, but it's always like solid. His composition solid. Very good director. And I mean, even on A View to a Kill, there's bits and pieces there where I think it's like a fabulous little film. If you look at it, it's just working with strange restraints. And I think when it does get a bit silly, like the fire stuff, the fire engine, and like how do you block that? It becomes quite awkward. But I think for a multitude of directors, that would become a slight issue. So I think John Glenn, like you mentioned again earlier, I think has to be applauded for a great rendition here. I was always, I don't know if when he retired, John Glenn, but I wonder if there was any conversation for him to do GoldenEye, or at least go back for a third film, because it feels like there's something quite strong here at the moment. It feels like they're here in A View to a License to Kill as well, which he shoots again, very interesting helicopter and plane scene in the opening, and then he has a massive big blowout at the end. Some quite tricky shots there. He feels very accomplished. So I don't know much John Glenn out of Bond either, so I'll have to keep an eye on that. But again, just to go on, not to again to move on to what you want to speak about in a second. Sorry to interrupt, but I just feel like he's very much should be applauded for a really solid feature here. Out of a lot of Bond films, has great iconography. Bond looks amazing in some of his outfits as well.
Yes, no, totally. I had two things. We have to hit them, and they're really questions for you, Jack, because I know these are kind of your special interest with Bond, and I just needed to see with it. Number one, was this theme song performed at the Amazon special video where they did all the Bond themes and performed them live? And if so, how was it?
Oh my god, I don't know. A few were missed. License to Kill was performed by Ella Eyre. The Living Daylights, who would have performed that? I don't think it was. I don't think it was on Carson. I'll tell you one thing that definitely wasn't. Another Way to Die wasn't. The World Was Not Enough was performed by Garbage. The Die Another Day sadly wasn't. Madonna never came back. I don't know. I can't remember if this was.
Wow.
Oh my god, I'll have to just check here. Sound of Bond, I think it was. Have you seen the documentary yet?
No, I've never. I'm gonna watch it when we're done with all these.
It is good. Oh shit. I can't remember. They did do one thing where they actually played something from Moonraker instead of actually doing Moonraker.
Oh, that's weird.
Oh god, License to Kill's there. Cuba Chase. No, it wasn't.
Wow.
Oh god, no, I'm not wrong. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
Big mess.
Yeah. Again, why that is the case, I don't know. But then again, they got Live and Let Die by Skin. You'll love it. I don't want to spoil it for you. There's some they go overboard where they bring Hans Zimmer in, and like the guitar doesn't work. It's like fun because they play like the Bond Escapes, No Time to Die. But
sure.
There's a very emotional rendition of You Know My Name by David Arnold. I don't want to spoil it, but fabulous stuff. But License to Kill by Ella Eyre, fabulous.
Love it. And then the other point is we definitely need you to assess Dalton's fashion sense. How is the fashion in the film for you? Because I know you really love the fashion in these movies.
I do. As you can tell, I am the Tom Ford of his day, the Calvin Klein, let's say. I think that I've always preferred him in License to Kill. I've always liked the blue suit that he's in with the black shoes. I've always thought he's always looked quite smart in that. But here, um, I never get the impression that he's that type of vanity in Dalton, especially in that type of James Bond. I always got the approach that he was very rugged. And I think he's especially his costume design. I always think references that. I feel like he looks fabulous in a tuxedo, but him as Bond knows he doesn't want to be in it. He's not as agile, he's not as good as that. I mean, I might be reading into that slightly, I probably am, but I always get the impression that he's always a lot feels a lot more like if you watch him in the end of this, where he wears like the black uniform, the black like spy uniform, and then he's in Afghanistan a little bit earlier, when he shoots John Rhys Davis, not Afghanistan, but he's in I can't remember where he is, but he's in some place, and he's in like there's that like beige jacket, and he has like the white shoes and stuff like that. And he wears a Tag Heuer in this as well. It feels very much guerrilla type of boots on the ground, and I always get that approach from him. When you watch him in License to Kill, he has a Rolex. He's a little bit more. He wears like pinstripe suit. Looks really smart in as well towards the end. But again, it was never a thing in Connery's, and it was never a thing in Roger Moore's where tactical came into practicality and became obscene in No Time to Die, and then in Spectre, everything had to be reinforced that it had to be boots on the ground of reality. He had to wear Dana boots. He had to wear No Time to Die. He had to wear like his proper um, like commando outfits, and I sort of appreciated that. But there's also when he's beating the shit out of someone in a Tom Ford pinstripe suit in a cricket bathroom in Casino Royale, a cricket pitch bathroom, or the opening in Sienna uh, with what's his face with Mitchell in Quantum of Solace, like getting shred to shit with a suit on, or especially with his Harrington jacket running through the streets of that country, whatever they're in for oil or water, whatever it is, or him wearing Barber jackets in a Skyfall. But there's always like a level of practicality. But I always felt that started here. I felt like Dalton knew that there's a character who just wants to get down to business, and he's not really interested about wearing tuxedos. He's not really interested in wearing really expensive items. He's not there for the vanity of the situation. He's living, a very sophisticated lifestyle like Craig's character did, or more so even Brosnan's. But there was a character that was like, I'm here to do a job, I'm going to do the job. I never sort of got that approach with anyone else, but it was reiterated throughout. But here, I just think the reflection of that is perfect. Again, an element that feels like it's thought about, it's thought over, it feels practical, its usage feels organic within the material. Another great excuse for to give this film more plaudits. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but in the same token, what he wears feels fundamental to what that type of character is. And again, I think he looks fabulous. But well, I'll say this openly. I think there's also an issue where I think people look at him. I don't think he was necessarily the most attractive Bond. Very rugged, not as handsome as Connery, not as sophisticated as Roger Moore, and obviously no one really sort of tend to notice George. And I think that feeling has been brought back a few times with Brosnan and Daniel Craig, very rugged type of Bonds. They didn't. I mean, I don't think when you look at Roger Moore in the early Bond move, it's like Jesus Christ, like is that like glued on, like. And I think he's one of very few Bond actors. This is allegedly who had his own hair. It's a tough subject. It's a tough subject for a lot of men out there, a lot of women as well. So I think it's an interesting thing to have that chat about. But I don't get the vanity in that character, whatever. I feel like if you went up against him in a spoon race, that character in his prime, he would scare you to death. If you were in an elevator with him, he'd scare you to death. A BBHR nightmare. One thing I wanted to mention too before we go, this film is also different for another reason, for recasting a character. Now, Lois Maxwell doesn't return after being in a lot of the Connery movies and a few of the Roger Moore things. I believe she's in a few of them. I'm not too sure. But we have a different Moneypenny here.
That's true.
who's only in two of these films. Samantha Bond plays her in the Brosnan era, very underused, but she's there. And Naomi Harris, who's actually gorgeous, plays Eve Moneypenny in the Daniel Craig era. I feel like there was a missed opportunity to really explore this character here. And I know it's like, what do you expect them to make a spin off? But nothing like that. I just feel like she's got really good chemistry with him as well.
Yeah.
She's very much like I like Carla. I found as well to be quite strange, and I always quite like that thing as well. Because again, subconscious as a kid, you don't really realize that, but he fancies money, and it's very clear. Yeah. But Carla looks like her, so he has a type. I like that. I think just very strange elements that you don't really sort of give a shit about, but in a long, it's like details that I quite like, and I think she looks gorgeous in this film as well. But I just wish that at multiple levels they just failed to really kickstart that character. But I just wondered what you thought about her because she's not in a lot here, but she does make a few mentions, and she does actually reference Famke Jensen's character, doesn't she? About Russian.
Yeah.
A Russian spy who kills people with her legs and stuff like that, which is quite funny.
No, I always like Moneypenny, but she's always. I mean, I felt this. I think we talked about this. I forget which one, but we talked about it previously. Where like she is always so reduced as a character just to be that couple of scenes, and it's frustrating because she always has great chemistry with Bond. She always no matter which actor. I think probably one of the most consistent castings in the Bond franchise, where I think like pretty much every single one kind of kills it and kind of steals the show early on as they're setting everything up and has that very different and they never really go deeper. I mean, they never really expand that character. Again, not necessarily saying I need a prime original series about it. That's true. I'm not saying that.
I'm screaming for it.
Well, we'll be there.
I will be after this podcast. I'll be smashing the wall at me.
That's true. But yeah, no, I'm with you on there. Yeah. But I'm also so used to it at this point with Bond. I do like the type bit where they look similar. That's cute. But
yeah, it's just like a little small detail, isn't it? But I think she's really underrated here as well. And another, it feels like the lost generation of Bond. It feels like this almost feels to a certain degree the same way as Lazenby as Bond in A Majesty's Secret Service. It always feels like the forgotten ones, and because they're the better ones. And I think you don't want to keep on showcasing your best meals when you've got a dynasty of stuff that you need to sell. And I think if you single out the better ones. I mean, we had this chat last week about Man with the Golden Gun. I don't know why I'd ever watch that film again. When I think back about that film, I feel like, was I too harsh? And I realised, like, I probably could have gone even worse on that film. Like, it's just very hard to watch. But then I watch something like this, and I think, why is nobody, like, saying that, 40 years on, this is still, like, really, really good. Top-tier Bond film. Very good action. In the pantheon of action films, it's like, I mean, 6 years later, you get Demolition Man. Oh no, that's License to Kill. But like almost like a decade later, you get Demolition Man and stuff. Action movies have changed.
Oh,
Die Hard is 89 or 90, which is 2 years later.
Yeah.
So again individual characters, individual action heroes. Bond has always been the archetype of that, but it does feel like these are forgotten in a history of really good action movies and the likes of Predator the same year, 87. You've got Die Hard the next couple of years, and Bond again within an era, like we said with Moore within the 70s, ultimately comes as an aspect of, well, we're watching a lot of individual type of characters here with an excess, Nakatomi Plaza, the Predator played by John Claude Van Damme. Stuff like that. You go and watch those films of Arnold Schwarzenegger, like a bodybuilder type. Then there's Bond, a real guy in a real situation, geopolitics. It's probably a product of its time where people are in a very similar, albeit slightly different melting pot, pushed back against watching those significant steps because we're seeing it on the news a lot. And I think, why not go watch Arnie fight an alien, or why not go watch Rambo 9 or whatever it is, Rambo 3, and again, the Russians, which the third one there is the one that nobody likes anyway because it's a bit too hand on heart on the nose, although kills a helicopter with an arrow and stuff like this, crazy stuff in there. But but go watch Bruce Willis fight his way up a tower, there's just like a funness to it. And I think Bond again gets forgotten about. That's happened, I think, throughout. He's been very lucky in the Daniel Craig era because '07 is '06 is just before Transformers, where that fucking skyrockets.
Yeah.
You know, '08 is and then '07 is the final the era after Die Another Day before Quantum is the Jason Bourne era, which then comes back and doesn't do very well anyway. But after that, it becomes the Marvel universe. And I think it's been the archetype to that. And they've done very well, but they've not released enough of them because they can't compete now. And I think it's an interesting format is that when you had these films that were larger than life back then, the Roger Moore, it's opposed itself now. Roger Moore's was larger than life, and people didn't want to go watch The Godfather and The Exorcist because they were too hardcore and too harsh. Now, Bond has gone from the fantasy element into the boots on the ground approach, the character that we want to see, which we all want to more benefit of that. But the opposing of that is that, well, you can't take your kids to that. You can't take your kids to watch No Time to Die, but you can take them to watch, Captain America 9 or Iron Man 16 or even just like a Thor 17 or an Ant-Man, whatever that is, or the poor bastard who go to watch Eternals. God rest their soul. Eternals
Number
2
2 coming out soon. No.
Yeah. Do you know, Carson, I think we're going to be very, very, very well into this podcast before that ever happens. But I still pray to whoever's up there every night that comes
Hey,
out.
spoiler alert! We're like, just to peel back the curtain a bit, we're recording this the same day as the MCU Comic-Con presentation, so it could be announced tonight. I have my hopes up. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I would oppose that, but yeah, I'm surprised. That and Blade, I tell you what. Yeah, because everybody's wanting that to happen. But Gambit 16, we're bringing back like characters from 17 years ago that have died 16 times. Like they need to just let it go now. Whoever's just giving them the. I'm gonna have to move on because I'm getting really into that. I'm sorry, but no.
Don't act like you're not cheering for Elektra when she comes back. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, she needs that job, doesn't she? I'm sure she needs that job, but I'm sure that Wesley Snipes needed that job as well. You just need that paycheck to do that sort of shit. Why is Daphne Keane back there? Why she's got a really good career ahead of her? She needs to move on. Let Millie Bobby Brown take that sort of mantle. Let her ruin her life doing that. He's got Nails playing an Enola Holmes.
She's busy with Enola Holmes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate that we keep making the same reference. It's like a unique form of TikTok brain rot where we're like Eternals, Enola Holmes. Like, we got to stop.
Yeah, there's like people there's more stuff out there. Yes, there's loads more other shit. Yes, there is. I mean, I'd rather see Meg 3 than any of this ever again, But but why can't Ben Wheatley come back? The good Ben Wheatley, Free Fire Ben Wheatley. When I met him, he was just so simple and good,
Where did it all go?
Yeah. Rebecca, whatever that was. Arnie Hammer. We're going down a rabbit hole. We don't want to go down there. That's next week, isn't it? Carson's got that lined up. Not any more controversy.
Our hot away bowl summer, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Which we'll leave there for the time being. But yeah, I think Bond's in an interesting place now because it can be not to use it against something as a positive, but I do think it has now the power to be that opposing. That opposing thought and feeling to like watching MCU mush.
Yeah.
How it succeeds on that will be interesting because it'll have to have longevity. But I mean, MCU rot is very well and truly in. I think the fatigue has gone now, and it's just they're going to reboot this after like Secret Wars and stuff. And I think Bond's in a really good era now where if they get it right and they play it not safe but just simplify the simplistic attributes of it and not elevate the material and just make it not too simple but at least to be digestible but also take risks and find that really difficult balance, which is very tough to do. Stephen Knight's got a very tough job on his hands. But if anything, if counter programming can suffice, I think if you look at Villanueva's career and you look at Dune fighting against, I was in Venice and I remember speaking to Nick about this. I didn't think that part 2 would ever be realised from Dune. The screening was like really awkward. No one really was like watching it. I was like, oh, this is like quite a big thing. It felt like someone just getting a lot of money and putting it on screen. And I enjoyed it for what it was. And I think look back, really good. Part 2, Like, I'm shocked he got that on screen. Now they've got part three. You know that it's releasing the same day as Doomsday. They have some hope in it. I think there's definitely a way of filmmakers to do counter programming and still make franchises but make them different. You know, watching Frank Herbert's Dune come to the screen is fun. You know, but everything comes to an end. You know, and I think Bond's in a really awkward position now where it survived multiple very deep wounds. The MCU has done the same, has made more films in a shorter period of time, and the quality is diluted. And I think Bond has had moments, but they're interesting as parallels. I don't see them not making MCU films. I think Bond should still highlight the fact of, if you can get a good Bond filmed every 5 years and not shit one every 2 years, that's got to mean something. And I think going forward, I think that's brilliant. You know, they've just got to focus on stuff like that. And, you know, there's 85, 87, 89. There's two different Bonds there. And before that, in 80, 83, you've got Octopussy. So they're still recasting at this era, between 85 and 87, and making two very different Bonds, but still on a schedule, still with very good practical effects, great stories, great chemistry, great infatuation with the character. John Glenn loves that. Timmy Dalton loves that character. Um, you know, the Broccoli family, as well as Michael J. Wilson, are infatuated with that character. It needs that back. It needs that love. It needs that adoration of people making it. And you know, they've done these every 2 years, and now it's bigger films appreciate that, and the star has to have a fucking opinion on everything. You can't just act, can they? They can't just get on with the job and get act. They want to do the screenplay like what's happening on Doomsday. Why can't I have this line? Why am I not being cut here? I've heard that film is in serious trouble. That screenplay is 3 hours and 15 minutes, and they're trying to cut it down to 2 hours and 45 minutes running time. That's for half an hour of character moments. And, you know, half an hour of character moments might seem sort of like so dispensing to get rid of it. But those are the moments that make that weight more important. If you're going to kill Patrick Stewart off for the third time, you know, if you don't make it mean something for the third time, it becomes a little bit narrow-minded and boring. And the same thing is going to be with Bond. They've got to bring this back with a feeling of infatuation. We need Bond back. Why? Make that reason why. And I think when you look at Dalton here, it was a perfect time to do it, perfect time to drop that character. There is this infatuation of love and adoration for this character, and seeing something a bit darker than what came before and having fun with it, romanticizing it, making emotional, making it a character-driven piece. There feels like there's life in this old dog, yeah, even in 89, 87. And they did the same thing in 95, and they did the same thing in 06, and they'll do the same thing again. And I think when we watch these films of debuts, they're really stellar, fabulous film. Truly one of the best Bond films. Now, the question is, Carson, if you had to put this in a top five, does it make it? And if so, where do you put it?
I definitely would put it in the top five. I mean, this
Right.
is my. I'd be honest. I think this is going to be in the top three for me. I'm excited to rewatch the Craig films because they are certainly a contender there with both Skyfall and Casino Royale, which I both really enjoy.
Yes.
I truly am hard pressed to find another film that I would put above this. I mean, I would put this above Lazenby's, which is in my top five.
Wow.
This was really good. And then I mean, like, don't get me wrong, Connery stuff is very, very fun. I don't think any of Connery's stuff touches, I would say, the weight of this, or like the action of this, or the vibes of this. And then I really don't. I mean, like, GoldenEye is probably up there for sure. I would not necessarily say I think this is above GoldenEye for me. So I think this probably would be at worst number three. Probably at best, I would say number two. I don't think I could put it one. I'm sure I will revisit this the next time we talk because I'll be watching Casino Royale and Skyfall before then. But I think for right now I'd put it at number three.
I think I would go five would be Thunderball. Four would be Skyfall. Did I say what have I just said then? Five would be
Thunderball.
Thunderball. Four would be Skyfall. Three would be shit. Three would probably be shit.
The Man with
Casino
the Golden
Royale.
Gun. Oh, okay.
No, stop that right now.
Wait, which
Two,
Casino Royale?
Oh yeah, the David Niven's 1967, of course. Um, I would then go.
Wow.
Oh God, I'd go. Fucking hell, I'd go Emergency Secret Service, and I go this. That's how much I love this film,
Wow.
and that's
Yeah.
harsh because I love For Your Eyes Only, and I love the. I almost said it then. Man of the God, I always I love the Spy Love Me, but I just think that those films get romanticized in an era that I don't think was very good. And I think that when I look at this, I think this is so stellar. License to Kill would be too far. I'm so looking forward to knowing your opinion on that. Please message me after you watch that
Yes, I will.
because it's the antithesis of this. This film is about hope and about breaking away from just breaking away from certain things. If it's like partnerships or destiny or just like the idea of just breaking away from something that's chaining you down. License to Kill is a very dark film in the fact that it embraces that you've got to go that extra step, and there's a nastiness to that film, a serious cruelty to it, but one that feels in the term in the context of the film itself feels very much very well in within its rights to do it, and it's very dark and again tragedy in that film it goes above and beyond, and I think when you look at Bond and you look at something like this, I can understand why people would be turned off by that because there's a moment in that film when like in a where they put someone in a compression chamber, and even as a kid I'm like Jesus Christ that's dark, and I think it got a 15 at for the age rating as well. It pushes the boundaries even now for what they can get away with. It would definitely be a PG-13, but it very much reigns on a 15. I mean, I think there's even a bit of Bond where I think he says "fuck" in it as well. If he's on, I think he's trying to ski on a water ski on the back of a plane, and I think he says it, and I think he cuts out. He says "fuck me," something like that, and you can't really hear it, but he voices it. It's definitely a film that feels like I don't know. You're American, so it'll be very interesting for you because it's when you look at like cocaine movies like that, like the Scarface and shit like that.
Mm.
It's so far removed from the British sensibility that it feels almost out of world there. But when you watch a Bond character there, and it feels like almost in fantasy. So I think a lot of people have a difficult. Well, I mean, I just sound like I'm a fucking like straight laced. I don't know. I don't know on that sort of shit cocaine, so we'll leave that there. But I get the impression that I'm an American to watch it who's very much, again, the news there. I'm naive. Be interesting. I'm looking forward to your opinion. But this was a fabulous film to watch. A
Yeah.
really good, it's nice to go watch a film and just be like, this is amazing. I really enjoy this. I always enjoy watching this. It looks
Oh
great.
yeah.
I'm glad that you liked it as well. It feels like there's still hope in the old dog, even 20, 30 years after the fact. It feels really good to watch something where people are having fun. Um,
Yes.
and we'll,
That good blend of like serious and having fun though, and
yeah,
the romance, it all adds up. Like it really, this film like has a little bit of everything and it works together really wonderfully. I'll ask you before we go, just I've been thinking throughout this podcast, if you could have one Bond film like back in theaters for a week to see, what would you pick? Would it be this or would it be another one? Because I think this would be like exceptional on the big screen with the action.
oh, God. Do you know, I this is really tough. I wish we'd have done pre-planning here.
We can answer it next time
No,
for
no,
sure.
no, no. I need to do it now because I feel like trying to find that if that song was on Sound of 007 took the piss. There's quite a few where I'm thinking of visualizations, but I'm also thinking of the audio. I'd love to see Quantum of Solace on the big screen because I love it when they're in the Aston Martins. I love it when they're in Sienna. I love it when they're in the opera. I love the score to that film with David Arnold. So dark, and there's something about watching that film. You'd only been there in 100 minutes, and it's only an hour and 40 minutes. I'd love to see Thunderball back on the screen. I'd love to see Imagine the Secret Service, and I'd love to see this. I agree. I don't. That's such a hard question. That I can't answer that. I mean, I'd love to see this. Yeah, I mean, a couple of years ago they did it. They every week for 26 weeks in the UK they put them in cinema. And when the time I had, the time I wanted to go book my tickets. I was going to America to get married. I was like, oh shit, I can't postpone this. I was gutted because I was like, oh my god, I can actually watch, because I remember the last time I watched Quantum was '08. Considering around
Yeah.
'06. I'm not bothered about whatever came after 2012. I couldn't give a shit really, but before that, but I never got the experience to watch Brosnan. I mean, watching GoldenEye with Eric Serra's themes and Tina Turner, dun 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 dun, would have been amazing. But watching the parachute go and The Spy Who Loved Me would have been fabulous. But I like to have watched For Your Eyes Only there. There's a lot there, but I think there's a lot more nostalgia. But I think the modern films just before my time, or watching that again with the sound design, would have been
Oh,
fabulous.
yeah.
What about you, though? Anyway,
It's hard because I think the visuals of specifically On Her Majesty's Secret Service is more striking. I mean, I think some of the visuals
oh
I
yeah,
think about often, but when you factor in the sound design also and the action, I think for right now I have to say this film, like this really would be, I think, and I also think because like also in this fantasy world, then hopefully then people would rewatch this in theaters and be like, holy shit, this is great. Because I
yeah,
think it would play exceptionally well with modern audiences. I don't think this is one that like has aged, as we mentioned previously, poorly to where I think like it's a oh, you have to have an appreciation of this going in. I think this kind of has it all. I mean, especially the sound design. I cannot express how much I love the sound design in this film,
yeah.
truly. But it's a hard I mean, there's so many good ones as far as action or visuals and
I forgot
colors.
to.
Ugh.
I forgot to tell you something as well. We were on TV. We were on TV. It's not like fucking on daytime TV. We were watching TV down at my dad's last weekend on my dad's house, and there was a Bond film on. I didn't tell him what it was. It was a Majesty's Secret
Oh.
Service. I was like, oh, we're just on a podcast, but I wonder what he says. And I was like, oh, are you enjoying it? It's like, oh, I've never seen this. So what do you mean? He goes, and it was a sequence where Lazenby goes into M's house to look at the butterflies.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what is this? Is this James Bond? I went, yeah. He goes, I've never seen this before. Who's this? Well, it's George Lazenby. I goes, Majesty's Secret Service. He goes, oh, I didn't know that. I've never seen this part of the film. I think there's still like a serious like unseen element to like those. I mean, just a simple character moment in the film where like he's a gobshite at someone else's house and he gets put down a level. Like my dad was like, I've never seen this before because he's zoned out when he was probably watching it on video. Like the
Right.
stuff to still go back there, and I think, like you said, it would play really well now. I think audience again, a brain rot setting on it. It's like, oh my god, like, is he going to like get the throne out? But no, there's so many good ones. I mean, visually, I'd love to see, but this is great stuff. This really good stuff. Really fabulous to go watch. Look how white my arms are, my tan line. Fucking not doing that. How bad is that? But no, what a great film to go back on and just
Yeah.
explore and have some fun with it. And again, we've probably not gone into the geopolitics too much, but I just feel like that's not really something we want to get into. I feel like that's for other people out there, but it does get
Yeah.
stuck in as well. It's very keen to have those conversations. I
No,
mean,
which I
that's one.
respect. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to mention this just very briefly, and very bitterly before we go. They would not have the balls to do this again, and also I think one reason why they don't show this a lot now is that connotations of Bond working with the rebels, who evolved into do some terrible acts on the U.S. soil. I do think there's a very interesting irony about that Bond is working with those people, um, who are played in the film very romantically, let's say, but it is what it is. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. I do think there's an issue with how this film has aged to a certain degree on geopolitics that is very difficult to worm its way out of, just purely because of how history works. I don't think it's any fault of the film. Who would have known that would have happened? 20 years later, or well, less than 20 years later. Let's say 15 years later, or 13 years. Let's say, but I don't know. But I think that's one primary reason why this doesn't quite get the push it does when you compare it to something like License to Kill, which gets airplay on TV all the time in Britain, which is interesting because of how dark it is. But Living Daylights is one that's often than not slightly muted, and I think that's one political element of the film that you can't cut it out because it's integral.
Right.
But by ultimately showcasing it, it's got to accept that it's a little bit not risky now, but it is one of those things where it's like, oh shit, like James Bond's working for the guys who did pretty bad things when all things said and done. But then so again, he works with the Russians a few times, doesn't he? And they've done terrible things, and I'm sure that he's worked with a few other people who've done terrible things.
Yeah.
You know, He's worked with Rami Malek, and that guy's done terrible things on screen, hasn't he?
I mean, arguably worse than any of the other people you mentioned. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah, there is that debate, isn't it? Yeah, there is. I mean, we're not the podcast for it,
Bohemian
but
Rhapsody, other events.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
like.
yeah. I mean, he was something very strange in Twilight Breaking Dawn Part Two. I don't know. I don't know what that was all about there. We'll
A
move
lot of
on.
questions. Yeah.
It was, yes, definitely. Why we're watching this is one of them, but yeah. But thank you
Well,
very much, Adam. This was
no.
fabulous.
No, thank you for joining. I mean, I really like planning the Bond franchise. I was like, oh, we've never talked about these, so it'd be fun. I did not truly expect, especially from these earlier works and like kind of randomly picking these, to run into something like The Living Daylight. So absolutely fantastic conversation and fantastic watch. If you've not seen it or you haven't seen it recently, I think we would both highly recommend you go check out The Living
Yes.
Daylights. I'm excited, Jack. We have one more episode in this. One more in our Hot Bond summer. The summer days are ending, and we're ending this a little switch up from our initial schedule, but I think it's a good choice. We're ending this by going to the place where I'll begin for Bond with Skyfall,
Oh wow.
one of the biggest Bond films. So we will talk about our boy Daniel Craig and Sam Mendes and all that good stuff as we finish out our Hot Bond Summer series. So with that, let's go to our rapid reviews. Anything we've seen recently that we haven't talked about before? Man, I have a shit list. I am warning now.
What you
It is
were doing? Now,
well.
don't speak too soon just yet. Tell you.
As far as new releases, I watched Minions and Monsters. Woo! Banana, the Minion stands, rise up. Actually, a very joyful film. I think if you like filmmaking and the history of film, there's so many film references in this that are very fun. Would actually recommend. I am a big fan of the Twisted Childhood cinematic universe. This is the same franchise as like the Winnie the Pooh horror film, the Bambi horror film, not the horrible ones you watched, to be clear. But I did venture to LA to watch Pinocchio Unstrung in the theater, and it was fine. It was fun. It's starting to get a little bit too Terrifier for me. I don't like the Terrifier franchise, and it's beginning to take a little too much gloating in some of the like, because now they also have money, so it's like a very very extreme amount of like very realistic brutal looking gore, and sometimes it's getting to be a little bit much now. But I still thought this had some very funny moments. Freddy Krueger himself is in this, so that's I guess always exciting. I will plug, I'm not going to talk about it a lot now. Obviously, you saw the Odyssey. I will say if you wanted to check out my thoughts, good friend Nicola Grasso, friend of the podcast, has Anatomy of an Adaptation. I am on there discussing the Odyssey in the coming weeks, so you can check out that episode. And then finally, I was going to watch Evil Dead Burn. And I was like, you know what? I like haven't like I remember not liking the films in the new trilogy. Let me just revisit them, and then we'll go watch Evil Dead Burn, and we'll see our opinions. And I watched 2013's Evil Dead, and I was like, I'm actually good. So I'm not going to watch Evil Dead Burn. But yeah, a pretty horrific like trilogy.
Yeah.
I don't even know. It's really like 2013. Like I would love to. We will never do this, to be clear, because I would never want to spend time with these films. But I would love to do theoretically a ClapperCast on them because they're so bad, and they just like truly. I don't even understand the 2013 concept. It's like I said it was the Moana 2026 of the Evil Dead franchise, and I feel that way. I just think it's like such a worthless film. I don't get it. And then I think the next one's like awful bad, but also has like way worse filmmaking. So I just don't know. Evil Dead Burn, maybe when you go to streaming, I'll watch you, but I just could not muster up the courage. So it's been a rough week, I'll be honest. Jack, what have you seen recently?
I've watched an absolute pile of turds, but these are going to range from a lot of stuff, so just stay with me. I'll try to be very quick. I watched Blink twice. I don't if I've reiterated this on any of the podcasts, I do apologize, but I haven't done this for a while, so just stay with me. I watched Blink twice, Zoe Kravitz's debut. A very good film with a great twist in it, which I think you can almost see coming, but the way it's done, executed, how it's written, and implemented in the film is like very, very difficult to watch. I think a filmmaker with a little bit more time under a belt would be able to develop those sequences a lot more gentle, but a lot more starker and darker within that feature as well. Ultimately, sort of blended in a little bit more, but for a debut, I think it's genuinely very, very gut wrenching to watch. Very, very good film within the pantheon of a Me Too era as well. I did hear some like pushbacks about the MGM Amazon trigger warning before. I can appreciate that as well. I think it is a dark film to watch, especially with its depiction of certain things and flashbacks and cutbacks. It is very difficult to watch. I did watch Joe Carnahan's The Rip. I was meant to watch this ages ago and I just forgot about it. And my dad was like, "You should watch that." I was like, "Oh shit, yeah, I like Joe Carnahan." Um, a film that I think for three quarters, I think is trying to emulate a far better, intense, atmospheric, and interchangeable, character-driven piece that slightly just opens up and puts a twist on a twist that you know is coming. But I think again, really well done. I like a lot of Joe Carnahan stuff. If you look what he's been doing lately, though, by that and a few films before, like he's made a few films that have come out that nobody has seen, and he made one at the same year that nobody's like spoke about, which I find fascinating. Right, this is where we take a little bit of a downpour here, so just go with me. I did watch Crime 101. Now, I'm going to just preface this, or preface this, should I say, with the fact that I didn't know at the time that this is the same person who made American, is it American Animals, that I adore.
Yep.
One of my first reviews on Letterboxd that people actually got that was right. Fabulous film about the issues that are happening with the youth in America, and especially youth in general, but that cultural issue where young people are disillusioned and just haven't got an opportunity to take them. I've been told to just take opportunities, and people who have got a very like in a directional element of university become direct in a place where they should find direction, ultimately find themselves in very stupid positions, but put themselves in there, and then having that interchange with the idea of a faux documentary as well, and it um, to be intercontextual and stuff like that, and meta, fabulous. This was appalling. This is like Heat if you'd watched it and then like tried to remember it from a dream. Remember someone was saying like Hemsworth is amazing in it, like there's nuance, and then there's issue with a character who cannot get out of first gear, and the fact that he's just trying to play Robert De Niro in Heat is that just soul crushing to watch because he hasn't got it, and he's so close of just playing the exact same character, and it's just you've got Barry Keoghan with the blonde hair like Val Kilmer in Heat, and I'm just like, do you know where has originality gone? Where has a director who was so full of fire and interchangeable ideas of what the format was for documentary within a film, then and then like cross-referencing, questioning the idea of these culprits and their ideologies, and then you watch Crime 101 and it's like, Mark Ruffalo's a seasoned cop, and the end of it just like lets everyone get away with it. It just everything ties up in a bow. And the only person who gets there scared them free is Halle Berry, and like she's just underused. At least there's some meat there about a character who's disillusioned with the idea of because she's 57 and these people have used her for her looks, and now she's become in this society's eyes unployable. Like that's the character I want to explore. That's a character who's been shit on, who now is being pushed, in a first world problems. Don't get me wrong, but ultimately it's still a problem within modern day society. And it's just like, no, we'll just want to watch Chris Hemsworth have a girlfriend who he just has no dynamic or no charisma with, and Barry Keoghan, who's like genuinely appalling within this. Anyway, we'll move on because that is a tragedy in its own right. It's just going to get worse, by the way, because I went on a pretty bad spin. I did watch Superman. I mean, like, what the fuck? Like, what? James Gunn developed those characters in Guardians of the Galaxy, and he got away with it because the whole idea about that music scenario with Peter Quill makes quite sense because it's the only connection he has to his mother and to Earth, and it's a bygone era of the 1970s where the world has changed, and I suppose that use of music there, the needle drop in this film, right, by Noah and the Whale, right, which was like big in 2007, is one of the worst things I've ever seen on screen. The whole thing is just an absolute fucking travesty. You're watching a character who's just absolutely repellent on charisma. Their dynamic with Lois Lane is like generally just appalling. The structure of that film is equally as disturbing. The film just starts and we're just dropped into it, which is like fair enough because we don't want to do an origin story, like thank God. but the way it's shot looks horrible. Everything's too bright. The character has absolutely no charisma whatsoever. The dog's the best thing, and it's CGI. Millie Alcock turns up at the end, who's appalling. Like everything in it's like no personality. You've got like the Justice League shit, whatever it is, the Green Lantern stuff. The comedies are absolutely atrocious. The whole thing about James Gunn to me is like it's just so lost. Like I'm not. I mean, your review of Supergirl obviously gives it that little bit of elevation because they're two pieces of shit in hell. But I would never, ever, ever, ever put myself to fucking go to the cinema to see that. I'd have been absolutely appalled. Do you know? Thinking back on that film, it's 2 hours of just absolute wasted of time and energy. Not as bad, but equally as poor. I did watch Len Wiseman's Ballerina, and I have mentioned this subconsciously throughout the podcast the last couple of weeks. Do you know, like, I swear to God, I've seen the film truthfully twice, and I do not know how it ends. I can't remember. I've seen it twice. I can't remember. Why is Keanu Reeves in this? Why did they have to make it interchangeable with that John Wick 3 and 4? Because, and the fight at the end, it's just like, it's appalling. Like, she's appalling, this film. She has absolutely no range, that actress. She's absolutely atrocious, Ana de Armas. Yeah, she's very pretty, but I'm sorry, those days are gone now where we can go on the coattails of someone who's pretty, who can get away with it. Like, she can't emote, she can't act. She does like these puppy eyes, and it's like, are we going to do anything else? And like, she meets her sister and she dies 30 seconds later. Nobody gives a toss, and even she's like so stubborn, so she's like, move on. Like Gabriel Byrne, paycheck, fair enough. And Norman Reedus, like, I don't get shot in the head and he comes back. I don't understand any of it. The gunplay is atrocious. The flamethrower thing at the end is like fun, but like it's just, it should have been its own thing and it should have been forgotten about. It should never been made. Len Wiseman needs to like. I know that I need to move on from that because that's getting really annoying. Even worse, however, I did watch, and I don't know why this is. I know this is going on, but trust me, it gets worse. I don't know why I watched this, and it partly just on a watch list. I was like, oh, what is this? I've never seen this. I watched Shane Black's Play Dirty with Mark Wahlberg. Oh my God, how the mighty have fallen. Oh my God. This film, as if AI made this and said it was written directed by Shane Black. I swear to God, I have no idea character reasons in this film. There are character decisions and arcs in here. Mark Wahlberg in the beginning is doing like, just kills people randomly, like innocent people. Kills them, right? Murders them. There's like a race horse track chase, which is like quite innovative, and then is forgotten about. And then he like teams up with the same woman who killed his team, and like they have a romantic relationship, and like it's like not the humor in this, right? Is genuinely, I say this, I'm going to say this. This is going to be terrible. This, but you might have to cut this out, right? But I swear to God, I've seen more humor in the 6 o'clock news about what's happening in the world right now than that film. It's that. No, seriously, that is that bad. I was watching it and I was thinking, like, am I fucking depressed here? Like, why am I not laughing and smiling at this? And I realized, I was like, just pay attention to what's being written here and like rewind it and listen to it again. I'm like, is that meant to be comedy? Is that meant to be funny to me? It's atrocious, man. Oh my God, like, you know, if I could give it, oh, that is unwatchable, that film. It's worse than anything out there. And then to get a bit more highlight actually here, and this is...
Well, can we just say Amazon Original, though, for Play Dirty makes you feel really good about Bond?
I didn't want to mention that, but yeah, that was not a particularly great sign, was it? But I did watch Maggie Gyllenhaal's The Bride. I really liked it. It takes a lot of risks, and I think as someone as you who doesn't really love that character, and so do I. I find that the renditions of those characters are very hit and miss. I think there's a really interesting person behind that camera who does not want to make the same shit again. And she does her own designs and makes it a bit quirky and a bit freaky, and there's a lot more intercontextuality, and it's a little bit strange, but it sort of works, but it's very odd. Like you said, the Mary Shelley thing, I suppose it's a way to elevate the material. But I thought Christian Bale played a great Frankenstein, someone who was just tired, and I think how she plays it as well, Jessie Buckley, about a character who was had everything taken away from her and given her a new life, but doesn't have that. She doesn't know who she is, and again, when she finds a little bit of solace with Frankenstein's monster, and that gets taken away from her, I love the iconography here. I find it fabulous. I don't know what Penelope Cruz is doing here. I have no idea here. I don't know what Annette Bening is doing here. There's a lot of fat around the edges here, with an otherwise I think is solid. However, I can totally understand why a normal average audience would see this and be like, what is this? I can understand it's a risk, a big high risk, but I did enjoy it for just having someone having a little bit of a bit of an edge to it. Two very different films, very quick here. I did watch John Watts' Cop Car. Have you seen this?
I have not.
I cannot believe that's the same man who made Spider-Man. This film is like a very comedic, thrilling film about two kids who rob a cop car, and it's just error after error after error, and it just goes from it's a great subdued, tight little film, 88 minutes long, about just a character who becomes from beginning to end very tragic in a way, but has like Kevin Bacon's fabulous in it, really good performances on, very gripping, really good little film. I can understand why you look at like the Colin Trevorrows and John Watson, why they get hired to do stuff like this, but it's difficult to watch that film that's all shot on location, very simplistic, and you watch like New Way Home or not New Way Home, whatever that shit's called, the Skyrocket 9 or something, I don't know, fucking Spider-Man stuff. It's like none of it's shot on location. I can't sort of fathom how a filmmaker can go from A to B and that being easier. But the last but not least, and I watched this with my wife the other night, we did watch Stop That Train by RuPaul. Best to last, of course. All right, as someone who does like Drag Race, right, I do find it quite fun. I'll be honest. That's my hands up there, gang. Like I'm being honest, and my wife lets me watch it as well, which is nice. There's a lot of missed and hit, and it's like there's a lot of like very strange use of what looks like AI in it, which I suppose is like quite repelling. And it's one of those films where like if you're not into that, it becomes very boring, very quick. And if you watch it in like with some other people who find that sort of stuff funny, it can be quite entertaining. But when it's the same sort of joke 19 times in a way, it becomes quite difficult to withstand. But that said, I would rather watch that every day for a month than watch Superman, Play Dirty, or Crime 101 every day for a month. So there you go, RuPaul for the win, and Andrew Shankman. So that's the shit I've watched this month. So it's best not watch Asking next week or whatever we're doing again, because it gets worse.
Yeah, that's brutal to be honest. But
I did think it was really bad, and you set it up saying, "Oh, I've had a bad week." We wait till this. Terrible.
it is nice hearing like I was the only one to hate Crime 101, so I'm happy that you were on the same train
Oh
and I was not
God,
just
man!
going crazy. So
What a waste of time that was.
2.5 hours, like
Yeah,
man, I don't know. Don't
I can't
know.
believe someone that's like. If you ever log that again, I swear to God, I will contact you and ask if you're okay.
Are you trying to say you're not going to be on the Uncut Gems episode in like 3 years? Come on.
No, I'll just, I'm no, no. I just think what a waste of fucking time that would be.
Yeah. No, I agree.
What could I get out of that? I mean, I read Jakub's review of it, and Jakub loves stuff like that. But to me, I'm just like fucking hell. I've watched some shit, but there's got to be better things in life than that. As I'm looking at the Wonder Woman poster and just thinking, was that
I
better?
Hey, I did rewatch Heat the other week and it was very good. So there's
Have
still
you
gems
seen
out
it in the
there.
cinema yet?
No, I wish.
I watched it in the cinema once, and they put the volume too high, and I swear to God, the ear ringing is like horrific when they have the big shootout. It's a fabulous experience.
Oh, I
Heat 2,
imagine.
though, it's coming. Heat 2, Electric Boogaloo's coming out soon. Read the
Have you
book.
read the
It's
book?
fabulous.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fabulous. Yeah. Read it last year. Forced myself to do it. I was like, it's really good stuff.
No, I'm
Um,
pumped.
yeah, at least there's something good looking for. I'm going to go watch Odyssey next week, for it to tell you. I'm actually going back to the church. I need to find him again. I need to find the Lord.
Well, I hope
It's
you
not
enjoy.
looking good at the moment.
I don't know, man. You go to the church and find it seeming quite empty that day, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's either that or
Well, you love Tenet, so we're good.
yeah. Again, I think I would have to just I don't think I could ever watch that film. Why would I ever want to watch that again? Do you know when I get older like this, and I think time is like just not it becomes quite obvious that you've got limited amounts of it, which is so fucking depressing to think about out loud. But I just think to myself, it's like, in what world would I ever want to watch that again? Or like the Man with the Gun, it becomes in perspective of like terrible films are just become increasingly worse. Like terrible's not good enough to describe that. Superman, like why? I mean, to be fair, Nicholas Hoult in that film is pretty good. I'm quite impressed by him, and he's quite fun in it. But everything else is dire. Oh my god! Like Crime 101. It's like what are we doing here? Like what we do? Why is it? I'm gonna have to move on, guys, because I'm gonna get anyway.
Yeah, save it for the Clappercast. Come on. Well,
God.
Jack, on that note, thank you so much for joining. I mean, luckily, even if new releases suck, or even if there's a lot of bad cinema, we can talk about some good James Bond and talk about some good cinema on here. Again,
isn't it?
we gotta cope how we can cope, right? Before Eternals 2 comes out. Jack, where can you find your work online?
You can find my reviews and just reviews basically on Letterboxd and Clapper. Letterboxd again, it's difficult to get. I'm so far behind, but I've done a lot of stuff. I'm in April at this moment in time. It's that bad. So just stay with me. It's just tragic. But I'm trying to watch some stuff that I wouldn't really watch usually. I mean, I have been watching Yellowstone as well. I mean, I've got to be careful because I'm talking about all this shit and like right wing stuff and geopolitics. I'm like Yellowstone, Taylor Sheridan, but I'm just watching that for Kevin Costner basically. And I'm not. I've been watching season 3, and which I was impressed with. Season 4. Do you know when we used to have TV shows at a beginning, middle, and end, where like the beginning of the season ended with the final of the season, and it felt like a linear story? I don't understand. Taylor Sheridan doesn't sort of get that. Like I'm watching. I know I'm going on here, but just bear with me. I'm watching season 4 of Yellowstone. I'm like, what has happened? Like what? I've watched 10 hours of this and nothing has happened. And you get to a finale that's so anticlimactic. Anyway, it's off air in next season, so I'll watch season 5 and move on. But that's why I haven't been posting a lot. I've just been so much in the Taylor Sheridan thing. And that Joe Rogan episode does not watch itself, so you've got to just stay on. I'm joking. Please don't think that. No, it's the RFK Jr. one you've got to watch because he's got some good points there.
Well, if you want to be healthy.
Yeah, exactly. And also that if you watch him very carefully, he doesn't open his mouth, and that parasite in his brain actually speaks for him. That's all alleged, by the way. But then again, people need to read up about that man. But yeah. Anyway, moving on. So you can find me on Letterboxd and Clapper with some reviews. Twitter's just a cesspool of shit, and now Euphoria's over. There's no real point going on there because there's nothing to talk about because nobody has an opinion about anything, and it's just MCU stuff. But the Doomsday stuff's been released, Carson. So there's all that to talk about, isn't there, on Twitter? And guess who the character has been withdrawn from an image in its theatrical and being edited out in its trailers to be reintroduced back in, that we all know is presumably someone very, very pointless and deductible. But I'll move it back onto you, again. But thank you very much, everyone. I know, all jokes aside, it's been dire for me recently watching shit. But this was a highlight. This was a moment in a really poor month. Or 2 or 3, and it's just nice to go back and to watch something. It's like we had it once, we had it so good, and it's lightning in a bottle, and very few films can get that, and it's good to watch and just have some fun with it. So thank you very much for letting me enjoy myself and not watch absolute shit.
No, thank you for joining, of course. Here on the podcast, myself and Jakob, we continue our Best Picture Rewind series with From Here to Eternity, so go ahead and check that out. I know in July we had a little bit of like a break from posting where things got a little bit delayed, but we should be back on schedule now, everyone. So that came out. Obviously, check out our review for The Man with the Golden Gun if you've not already. Coming soon, we're going to take a break from our series. I know we've been very deep in these 2 series, but we're going to be talking about The Other Side of the Wind. We have Gigi coming out soon for our Best Picture Rewind series. And again, we will be concluding later this month our Hot Bond Summer with a review of Skyfall. So with that, thank you everyone for listening, watching, supporting the show. We will see you next time. Goodbye.